Welcome to the Organizational Transformation Kung Fu Podcast with your hosts, Sandi and Jennifer Long.
Hello, and welcome to Organizational Transformation Kung Fu. I'm your host, Jennifer Long, and I'm here with my co-host, Sandi, who is in the lovely Toronto, Canada from Satori Consulting. Hi, Sandi.
Hey, Jen. How are you today?
I'm good. I am here in the heat dome of Denver, Colorado, and I am with Management Possible, and we are going to talk to you today about what we are thinking in terms of strategic whiplash. We want to talk about the impact of changing strategy on change management and the volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous world we are currently living in. And that acronym, the VUCA acronym, if you're not familiar with it, really has to do with the pace and the struggle of our lives and the business world today that's so fast, and it's a moving target, right? Everything is in transition. It's faster now than it's been in previous decades, and it feels that way in organizations because we're keep having to shift to keep up. It used to be that a 5-year strategic plan was a good idea and the norm, and now they're coming into 3 years, right? But now, post-pandemic, as we're trying to figure out how to go forward, it feels like we're doing them every year or every 20 minutes, depending on your perspective. So that's the topic for today. And so, Sandi, talk to me. Tell me what's on your mind in terms of this topic and what you are experiencing and seeing, and your perspective.
I hadn't heard the term strategic whiplash, but you're absolutely right. That's exactly what it is, and I'm going to be using that from now on, because that's what people are. They're bouncing from place to place and mindset to mindset, and should we do this? Should we do that? And so these 2-day offsites are becoming almost a moot point, because you go back to the day to day and things are just in such a flux that any strategy that you put into place is probably not that. It's probably not giving the top of mind that people need it to. So let's literally start about talking about defining strategy. And when I talk about strategy, I'm talking about what's that bucket, or that container that you want to say is where we're going. Where's the direction, and what are those things that we need to do to get there? And the importance of that is that it helps the internal operations kind of stay focused, right? And when you're in flux, it's the internal operations that becomes much more in a state of flux. So, the strategy is important, although it is changing more. So that's really why we want to talk about that today, because of the volatility and the impact on people. But it really should be your anchor, and it should drive the internal behavior of your people. But when it's confusing, I think, and I'm seeing, is that when strategy is changing and we're in this whiplash of what are we changing, it's hard, and it's time consuming, and it's a drain on resources, because people are going down one path and they're focused, and then we're changing and we're asking them to do something else. And so the time and resources that the inefficiency of that is really, really important. So we need to be able to stay focused on strategy, but yet nimble enough to change for things that were unanticipated. So we've just gone through a pandemic. Nobody saw that one coming. Well, we're still in the pandemic now. 7th wave, I think, is upon us.
Something like that.
Here in Canada, anyway. Natural disasters are happening. Wars are happening. And so we got to be nimble enough. But again, what's the impact on people? So really, that's where I want to focus today on what do we need to do to help our people through this.
Exactly. And some of the things that are causing the whiplash, right? So we talked about COVID not being really over is one of the things. And so kind of looking at the things that leaders are, what's the impetus that creates this whiplash, right? So we've got COVID, we've got inflation here in the US, we've got labor shortages, we have fears around the changing consumer behaviors based on all of
Mhm.
these things, right? Obviously, supply chain is still out there, and cybersecurity is up there on the top as well. So those are some of the forces that are creating a lot of this whiplash of what's happening. And I just throw that in there to set the container.
Well, it is, and I think the other piece that people aren't thinking about in that is that all of these things have impact kind of downstream on people, but culture, organizational culture, is going to be kind of at the brunt of much of that. So while it's not one of those big pieces, I think it's something that I think should be really considered when we're making these changes.
Well, and we're still
Because
struggling with hybrid culture, right?
yes, yes. What does that look like, and what's the impact of that, and the mental health issues of that, and all of those things? They're massive. I don't know. It just feels like when I do these strat sessions, the things that we're talking about are so weighty now compared to before. They're heavy, right?
Yeah.
But I think you and I were talking before. At the bottom line is that the people you need to have a human centered plan, because your people are the most important asset you have, and that's not tongue in cheek. That is true, right? That is where we need
100%.
to keep it going.
Yeah. Your
Yeah.
people are the thing that are going to get your company through this.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the market. It's not the profitability. You're only going to have the profitability if you've got the people there to deliver it.
Right. And we were talking, and I chat with a girlfriend of mine all the time about how people are the first thing to go, right? It's the commodity that, you don't invest. Many organizations don't invest in enough because they are the biggest drain on your bottom line, right? In terms of dollars and cents, right? So it's
Right.
this oxymoron of
That's
they
how the
cost too
CFO
much.
is looking at it for sure.
Right. But we need them to get the stuff done, but they cost so much money. And so when you're talking about the impact of change on strategy, you can't talk about it without talking about people.
Right. Right. And the mindset, right? What is your organizational mindset around change, right? There's the idea that just even the word change promotes discomfort, promotes reticence, resistance, promotes like, oh God, what are we doing now? Right. And the first behavior people tend to go into is just kind of that hide and watch,
Mhm.
as opposed to anything proactive.
Right. And do you think that's because they've seen it so many times? And it'll just go away. Many of them do, right? It's the flavor of the day. So we're going to wait and give it some time. And if it takes root, then maybe we'll have to make some change. But until that
Yeah.
actually happens, and I think you wrote in your book, Jen, that own up that around accountability is that people we're not really change resistant, right? Because we go through change all the time.
Right.
I think it was your book when you talked about how many people have, been in a new relationship in the last year, how many people have changed houses, how many people have changed jobs, how many people have ... And so we put a lot of negativity on change and thinking that people are resistant to change, but we're in it all the time. So again, it's that mindset shift that you're talking about.
Right. And there's a gal, I think her name is Cy Wakeman, who has put forth a new kind of change model, right? That really kind of looks at stop looking at it as change and start thinking about it in terms of business ready. Are we business ready? Right? Because are we ready for what's next? Because there's always a next. And it's you're just hitting the next wave, whatever it is. The waves don't stop coming just because you're not prepared for it. So it's really that, which I really like, because I do think change kind of sounds like this interesting permanent thing we're trying to achieve, some kind of level of stability. And I think even having the expectation right now that we're going to be somewhere for a period of time is defeating, right? We should just be going, what's the wave we're going to ride right now, and what's next for us, and how do we see that? Because then it takes away some of the pressure that we put on it.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, just changing it just, yeah, that pressure, it removes that pressure when you talk about business ready versus change, because change makes people go, oh, here we go again, right? And that whole manifestation of, oh, here we go again. But business ready really, it tones it down a little bit and it changes the conversation. And then I would suspect, and I would hope, it would increase buy-in, and people then can inspire and be inspired by the change as opposed to dreading the change. So business ready, I like
Right.
it.
Right. So let's talk about buy-in. Let's talk about that's a very tiny word for a big activity.
Oh, it doesn't happen overnight. Wave your wand and people buy
Oh,
in.
it's so compelling when we talk about it in the boardroom. It's so compelling when we're with the senior team having the conversation and we all understand the why. But communicating the why is the key.
Right. And so you have to have a communication plan that simplifies it, right? So the messaging has to be simple and it has to resonate with everyone. So, I often talk about the alignment of strategy to people, and people need to understand how their individual contribution impacts strategy. That's how buy-in happens, right? So I know that if I do this, then I'm actually adding value to a company that I believe in. But the message there has to be simple. And so when you're sitting around that boardroom and you're having that conversation, it may not be a simple conversation that they're having. And so like a planned communication strategy around that to simplify the message, to bring it down, is critical, I think.
100%, 100%. And it's the tip of the iceberg of what is called alignment. And alignment isn't we're going to hand you the slide deck and we're going to explain the why and we're going to email it to you and we're going to say, hey, have the conversation with your people. And so you have the conversation and then you're done. Alignment is an ongoing conversation all the time. And I think that's where leaders where they drop the ball, is they feel like we've talked about the strategy.
Right.
And strategy isn't like we talk about it once or we talk about it twice. Strategy and alignment is an ongoing conversation all the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so whose job is it, Jen? Whose job is it to create that alignment? What do you think?
I think your managers have to engage, your leaders have to engage, your team has to engage. And so it's a conversation you're basically having all the time with everyone.
Mm-hmm.
And it should be always one of the questions when you're in a team environment, when you're making decisions, because it's the decisions to take action are the things that are either going to keep you in alignment or take you out of alignment. And so are you asking at the point of your decision making, how is this serving the strategy? Does this keep us on? What are the second and third level consequences of this decision? And how does it impact our strategy? And if you're not asking that question as you make these bigger decisions, right? It's not your everyday decisions of process, but it is your bigger decisions of direction. That's where you can lose your alignment.
Right. Yeah. You're right. I think it's so much of it is that conversation, but that ongoing conversation using same words, similar words, right? And so that people keep hearing it. The more you do something, the more apt you are to believe it, or you hear something. And I think that's exactly what it is. I think, having a not change management, but having a framework around decision making and that the impact of decisions is critical. And I often see that decisions are made, but they're made in isolation. They're not made with a larger framework that says, if I do this, the consequences will be A, B, C. If I do that, the consequences will be D, C, and E. And what is then, what are we willing? Like, strategy isn't much about what we're willing to do as what we're not willing to do. Right. And so when we're making those decisions, what are we not willing to allow to have happen in that decision making, the impact of it, the downstream impact of it. So those conversations are critical, and then bringing that down to the next layer of managers so they understand, and then that they can have those conversations with their people.
Well, exactly.
People across teams can have it, right? It's not just up and down.
100%, that whole systemic and so one of the skill sets on top of the communication, right? The interpersonal communication, because this communication is not just formalized, all hands meetings or the big staff meeting. These are also one-on-one conversations. And so the interpersonal communication of, are you messaging? Are you consistent in your messaging? Are you all singing off the same page all the time in a consistent way, which is why communications plans are important. But it's also that whole one-to-one, because alignment in that one-to-one is, are you really listening? Because this kind of leads us into resistance, right? What is it? What creates the resistance? And until you listen, right? So communication is not just a download of here's what we're doing.
One way.
Not one way. It's that, what am I hearing? What is the fear I'm hearing? What is the resistance I'm hearing? What is the trepidation? What is the concern? And are we having a conversation about that? So one of the skill sets that's really important, right, is this inclusivity. Is everybody got a voice? And are we listening? And what are we hearing? And based on what we're hearing, how does that impact? Because that has to do with your whiplash, right? In terms of, if you don't listen to your employees, if you're not having a conversation truly, then you're feeling the resistance and you're feeling like you can't get in. And then what are you changing as a result of that? I mean, that's part of the issue, I think.
For sure. So I'm going to kind of ask a question on this one then. So what have you seen anyway, in terms of organizations that majority of areas adopt and are aligned and are moving forward on a strategy, but there's one area that's still resistant? Like, how do organizations deal with this small pocket that seems to be, gobbling up so much time? And, some organizations might just manage them out, right? But is that the right thing to do? Or do we?
No, Mr. Zuckerberg, it's not the right thing to do.
It's not the right thing to do.
We're talking about the leaked memo from Meta and about, let's use the performance management system to get them out. It's look at what is the issue. And I think a lot of times when you're in this change, what are we going to do different to address what we're facing? It's a lot of the adaptive change, right? So when I talk about adaptive change, that's it's how are people prioritizing? What beliefs are they holding on to? What habits have they formed that they need to evaluate and look at? And where are their loyalties, right? And those are some interesting pieces of the puzzle, but those are, when you're looking at change, you've got technical change. We're going to put in a system. We're going to change how we deliver this, right? The process is going to be different, which is kind of the technical aspect, which is pretty black and white, straightforward. But it's these other adaptive changes that I think, from a coaching perspective, right? Those are the things where we step in and we're like, what is the old truth that you're holding on to that's no longer true? But you're making decisions based on that.
Right. And I think, you nailed it when you said, is the belief system. And there's organizational belief systems, but there's also team belief systems. And oftentimes it's those belief systems that they're holding on to that will get in the way. And it is an old truth. But moving them forward, again, takes that time and energy from the organization and their leader to help them through it.
Right? Yeah. Can the leader recognize when they've got people on the team who are in habit patterns that don't serve a new strategy? Can they recognize and listen, you can tell by how people talk, right? Where their mindset is, what they're thinking, what they're believing in. And do our leaders do a good job of hearing it, recognizing it, and then asking the questions, right? Asking the deeper probative questions around, I hear you say this, which makes me think you're holding on to something that may not necessarily be the case anymore. And how comfortable are they in those moments, and from team to team, right? In that systemic teaming environment where one team may be trying to move forward, but they're up against another team who's just we don't believe, this is not how we all of those things come into play as a group.
Right. And then the messaging around that, because then the teams are pitted up against each other sometimes, right? Look at team A that's just doing so wonderful things, and then team B that's not. And, they become the second cousin that nobody really likes because they're not on board.
Well, exactly. And when you hold up a team as a shining example, is that team sharing, right? Are they sharing, here's how we're thinking about it. Here's how we got here. Here's where the light bulb came on for us. Are they helping to move other teams forward in their thinking, or does it just create resentment when somebody gets the shining light and everybody else is like, well, and then they can rationalize why they're the flavor of the month and their current team isn't.
Right. Yeah. Excellent. So where does coaching come into play, do you think?
Everywhere, all the time.
Nonstop.
I think coaching leaders on some of these things around are the level of inclusiveness, the level of collaboration, because business is complex, because these issues are complex, because they're weightier and heavier. Any leader who's thinking, I've got to figure this out by myself is crazy. You've got all these minds and you're all in it together. And co-created solution building, co-created conversations around context and why, and embracing new direction is the beginning of buy-in to begin with. So it should be second nature that you do it together, that you open the conversation up to even the bigger strategic thinking, because I think happiness lies in the ability to solve problems. Are we doing problem solving, or are we dictating as leaders?
Right. And co-creation creates alignment just by the very definition of it, right? Because everybody has been participating in it. And even if you don't agree, you can agree to disagree. But when you've been part of the conversation, you're able to move forward, right? And act with one voice, which then, permeates an organization. So it's so incredibly critical.
Don't mistake, you don't need everyone to agree on strategy. Yeah. You just need people to commit. And the way to commit is to let them talk it out.
Yeah. That is so important. I don't know how many conversations that I have with people around teams around what does consensus mean? Right? We can't move forward unless everybody, has the, 2 thumbs up. And that's not true. What you want to avoid is one person saying, this is what we're going to do without conversation. But not everybody is going to have, some people might have, thumbs to the side. One person might have a thumbs down. It's okay. When I used to coach the MBA program at Queen's, we used to use that in our teams all the time. We have to make a decision. Are we thumbs up, maybe in the middle or down? Just so we knew where people stood and we were able to move forward. If not, you get stuck in this gerbil on a wheel sort of thing of trying to get everybody to buy in 100%.
Right. And when you sense people are resistant, probe it. What's holding you back? What are you thinking? Why are you thinking that way? What are you concerned about? What are you afraid of? And those are the questions you want to ask. That what are you afraid of question is a big one, because it's meant to open the concern. I'm afraid, we're not considering this. I'm afraid we're not considering that. And you have to speak about your fears so you can let them go, so you can stand in them and solve it to move forward, because that's where we just don't want to address, because we're afraid of people's passions, right? And people's priorities. And some people have a hard time with the paradigm shift, and the paradigm shift is the new truth, right? This is no longer true for us as a company, and facing what that is together.
Yeah. I think every podcast we do, we probably touch on Patrick Lencioni's work, but it's hard to have that "what are you afraid of" conversation if you don't have vulnerability-based trust, and that's just the bottom line. So it's easy for you and I to come in as facilitators, as coaches, and ask those questions to try to get people to open up. But if they were in a room by themselves, it's probably not going to happen not because they don't have trust, but to be vulnerable. To be
Mhm.
afraid of something means that you're vulnerable in some way. And so people will not have those conversations generally.
Right. It takes courage. You must be brave. You must be, and which goes to the answer of where's the coaching happen. It should be coaching. You should have a coach in the room when you're in these deep discussions, because if you've got a good, especially if they're a team coach, right? um, they're going to be good at looking at the temperature in the room. Who's participating? Who's holding back? Of calling a timeout to say, I don't feel like we're having a real conversation about real issues. I think it feels to me like we're talking around something,
Yeah.
right? And they can
Yes.
help guide a team through what it feels like to kick those doors open.
It is very helpful, and I always say, I'm just there to see what I see and say what I see. It may not be right, but if I feel it, I'll say it. And that is often enough for people to shift.
Right. And once a coach can start doing that with a team members see how that works. And then they get brave enough that they can say, here's what I'm seeing. And suddenly that becomes easier for everyone else in the room, because a coach can model for your team some of the behaviors that you guys need to be engaging in to begin with, where you are standing outside the team for a minute to really kind of understand, paying attention not just to what you're talking about, but the dynamics in the room, and how is that helping or hindering the conversation for you to get to the better decisions, the deeper conversations, and the real questions to
Yeah.
make your
Yeah.
decisions.
Right. Right. And so, starting off talking about strategy whiplash, right? And the fact that, and all of that comes down to, well, yes, that's a reality that we're in today, but having really good discussions on how to make decisions, and allowing your staff and your management teams to have those conversations is really where you're going to, catalyze change over the long term, right? Even though that change may not be a long-term change, but allows them to create that buy-in and to move forward on whatever that initiative is. But again, it comes down to communication, right? And that's communication is such a big topic, but in this small container that we've created for today, it is paramount to success.
It is. And the what I would tell you, because it's whiplash, because it's not over, because your strategy is going to shift again, right? You're going to feel like you've got some momentum, but then you might be taking a hard left later, right?
Mhm.
These are skills you want to get good at, because then, even though maybe someday in the future we go back to a 5-year plan, right? But the fact that you get good at this, it's only going to improve your decision making, your collaboration, your teaming, right? They're all kind of woven in together. And this kind of whiplash is forcing you to lift these kind of weights to get some muscle in how do we ride this wave? How do we change our languaging? How do we get together more frequently? How do we collaborate more effectively? And shared leadership is the new norm, right?
Yeah.
Heroic leadership, not a thing. No one person has an answer. And so learning to collaborate and leverage everyone's thinking in this moment, now's the time.
It is. It used to be that everybody would look to the CEO as being the smartest person in the room, right? And maybe they were, maybe they weren't. But it's not the way we need to look at business today. The smartest people in the room are the people in the room collectively, right? So
That's
that
right.
collective output becomes the right thing, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
100%. 100%. I like
And
that.
so the middle of all of that is people, right? And I think you and I are very strong in where we think people land in this, and they're not to be used, as they can't have the whiplash. I guess they can see it, they can be part of it, but you don't want them in kind of highly impacted. And the only way not to is to involve them in those conversations, and for them to understand that, it's not change is fluid now, right? It's not one and done. It's not we're going to go here and we're going to stay here. But they need to understand that that's going to be the reality and the norm, and those conversations need to be had throughout the organization in order for people not to feel like their head is spinning all the time.
Right. Right. And create space for the reflective thinking, right? It's not always just solve the problem, but take the time to be reflective, because that's the ability to zoom out a little bit. I think part of the impetus is, oh God, we got to move. We got to run down this hallway really fast.
Yeah.
And you really want to be able to, strategy is that being able to really pull out and reevaluate what's happening with all your stakeholders, what's going on in that environment, and creating the perspectives, right, of the collaboration of who on your team is closest to which stakeholders, how do they know and what do they understand, and are you creating that space to really understand the nature of what you're making decisions about, to be able to zoom back in and create structure, create direction.
Right. Which says you have to slow down.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
In a very fast-paced world, you need to give permission to slow down, to have those reflective thoughts and reflective conversations, which is counterintuitive, right? We're all, like,
Very much
as I say,
so.
gerbils on wheels. We're going fast.
Yeah.
But we have to allow people and time and resources to slow down, to reflect, to embed change and move forward.
That's right. If you're going to come out of the straightaway at speed, you have to slow down when you get to the corner.
Yes.
Otherwise, you roll the car.
Or derail the strategy.
100%. 100%.
So in our VUCA world, right? In our volatile and uncertain and complex, ambiguous world, we need to take time to slow down. We need to think about people at the heart of change. We need to, yes, reevaluate strategy and shift where needed, but have good conversations about the why behind it, and then allow those conversations to take place throughout the organization and continuously, and kind of beat the same drum about the why behind it, so that everybody is, as you said earlier, singing out the same song page.
Exactly.
That's
and
where you get
alignment
buy-in.
is being able to answer the why and address the fear, address the resistance, right? Get everybody believing the same thing, because if you've got people stuck in old beliefs, you're dragging anchor.
Right. So change management. So change management plan, communication plan around change and strategy, highly critical. Right. It's no longer, let's get together for 2 days in a war room and pump out a strategy and, it'll all happen. No, it probably was never that way, but it seemed like there was more space and more time to let things take root, but not so much now.
Well, yeah, I'll tell you, from a coaching perspective, from a facilitation perspective, strategy meetings are still 2 days. It's I think the pre-work, post-work, and there needs to be a follow-up, right? There needs to be an additional strategy around when you get together. You're never going to leave a room in 2 days comfortable.
Yep. Yes, exactly. Well, so a big topic.
Big topic. It feels a little unresolved, but hopefully some of the stuff we've talked about today will help you frame in your own mind how to go about it, how to go about a little bit better, and more paced, and get business ready, baby, because it's business ready is going to mean something different every 6 months.
That's right. But have the conversation and don't be afraid, be courageous. And I think that's the organizations that are courageous that will be the ones that survive. And we're going to see in the next couple of years, all those different things you talked about, inflation, and, here in Canada, no different, across the world, no different. That's the number one thing that people are concerned about. The pandemic is no longer number one. It's about what's going to happen in our, with the inflation rates and all that sort of stuff. So with that being number one, things are shifting.
100%. And the last comment Sandy and I will make one more time is embrace your people. Embrace your people, because they are the ones who are going to see you through this.
Yes, that's right. Don't forget about them on this journey, because they are the most important asset that you have. Yes, the most expensive, but the most important. So, and more than likely, I'm going to say, Jen, is that they believe in the company more than you know. And so they want the company to be successful. They want to be successful. And so, rally your troops. Believe in your people.
Believe in your people.
Yeah. Excellent.
All
All right. So that is our thought about change management on strategy and strategy whiplash. And so we'll probably continue on this topic for a little bit, because it's near and dear to our heart. It's what we do every day, and it's not going away anytime soon.
Fact. All right. Well,
All right.
Bring us your comments. We love to hear what you have to say about it. Share this out, and we look forward to talking to you again on another episode of Organizational Transformation Kung Fu.
Thank you for listening, and please visit Sandi's website at satoriconsultinginc.ca. That's SATORI consultinginc.ca, and Jen's website at managementpossible.com. Thanks again.